Just how badly does Ole Miss need a win this weekend?
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. This episode brought to you by friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. NC State is one of my biggest letdown teams this year, but it's opened the door for who exactly? We'll talk about that question and under the radar games in a fantastic week of college football. This is the Saturday that we have all been waiting for. It's a handful of days away, and we're talking about Ole Miss LSU today here on the show with Stephen Willis of Locked On Ole Miss joining me. And Stephen, just answer that question. How badly does Lane Kiffin need to win this game? Like, if he doesn't beat Ole Miss, what comes after that? Or if he doesn't beat LSU, what comes after that in Oxford?
I honestly, I don't know, but this is probably the most important game in his tenure at Ole Miss. And you have a situation to where Ole Miss needs to win, because if they beat LSU after the LSU game, they have the same record that everybody before the season predicted they probably would have. They walk out of that game 6-1, getting ready for an Oklahoma game that they're going to be favored in, get ready for an Arkansas game that, even though it's in Fayetteville and is prone to get drunk and weird, they should be favored in that game as well. And then Georgia comes into town. And Georgia, I don't know if anybody else is watching this, but they look increasingly beatable in a conference that everybody looks increasingly beatable.
Yeah, I think that the Bulldogs are a really good team. They are not the Georgia teams that won the national championship in back-to-back seasons. Like, they are not on that level. I think that much is clear. They could still win the national championship this season. Don't get me wrong. I do agree with you, though, that Georgia game looks more winnable, especially because it is in Oxford, than it did perhaps before the season. But this LSU game is fascinating to me because one of these teams, because we don't do the whole tie thing in college football because we have our heads screwed on, at least in that particular department, everything else is pretty wild and nuts. Someone's going to be 4-1. So someone is going to have one loss. Someone is going to have two losses here, Stephen. And I know I'm stating the obvious there, but then once that materializes, it kind of seems with the schedules that these teams have remaining that, yeah, there's probably one more loss in there somewhere, and I don't think 9-3 gets into the playoff. Is it overstating things to say that Ole Miss and LSU's playoff hopes are on the line this week?
Well, Ole Miss's playoff hope was on the line last week against South Carolina. It just honestly, after they dropped the game inexplicably to Kentucky, every game became a playoff game for Ole Miss moving forward. Trying to get to that Georgia game with one loss became of the most paramount importance. LSU's in the same boat. They dropped a game to USC that all of a sudden that loss is looking more and more shaky as we go. And they might have a few more losses on their schedule as well because they still have to play Alabama, because we can make the joke about that. Alabama's given up like 70 points in 6 quarters, and 4 of those are to Vanderbilt. But there's still losses that are on both the schedule. And that Texas A&M game at the end of the year, good grief, that looks like it could be something as well. So I think the importance of this game is super high. But the fact that, listen, the Ole Miss LSU game being a top 10 matchup between both teams, both fan bases don't like each other. This is the game on the schedule that Ole Miss fans most want to win. LSU fans get really chippy towards Ole Miss fans when Ole Miss is good. This game just feels right.
Yeah, and I completely butchered the records earlier because I tried to do it from memory, which is never a good idea because I don't know what day of the week it is most of the time. Ole Miss is 5-1. That's where I thought they would be in this spot. LSU is 4-1, but they've played a combined 3 SEC games, so there's still a ways to go. I think in the SEC picture, it's a bigger game for Ole Miss because they already have that loss to Kentucky, but a lot of people were surprised by that. I wasn't as shocked. I was surprised because I thought they'd win that game, Stephen, but coming into the year, I thought there would be a stinker. I thought there would be a dud. but I thought it would be the South Carolina game. And then it happened against Kentucky, and I said, okay, I think Ole Miss got that out of their system. They go to South Carolina, and I'm not writing that game off as, oh, no, the Gamecocks just aren't any good. Like, they think, like, no, I think South Carolina is a pretty solid team, and LSU, or Ole Miss, rather, was dominant in that game. The offense was good. The defense was great. What did you see in a bounce-back performance?
Man, what I saw is Lane Kiffin accidentally kind of lucking into a strategy of early 2010, 2011 Alabama murder ball is what happened. Ole Miss ran the ball twice as much as they threw the ball. They protected their defense in the second half because they knew if that game lasted 8 quarters, South Carolina was not going to score a touchdown. And the only way that South Carolina would have a chance of winning that game was if Ole Miss helped them. So you have a situation where, hey, just get through, win 27-3. It feels like you won 50-3. It was just like those Alabama, Nick Saban, Kirby Smart teams from like 2011, whenever the Honey Badger for LSU was running around, those time periods. So that's what I saw. That was an unbelievably dominant performance coming off an unbelievably poor performance against Kentucky. You had a situation in that game. The Ole Miss defense played well, but there was 2 honestly fluke plays to where you do a duck and chuck down the field on a 4th and 7, come up with it after a push off, and you fumble the ball directly to a tight end on the goal line for the winning touchdown. These things are not repeatable. And as long as Ole Miss plays well and protects their defense and does what they need to do, you have a chance to hold most of the teams you play to a relatively low scoring mark. And with the talent that Ole Miss has on offense, it's going to be hard for other teams to play ping pong with Ole Miss in those games.
Our friends at FanDuel have got Ole Miss favored by 2.5 points on the road in Death Valley, which everybody knows not the easiest of places to play. But take a look at this matchup at a glance, Steven. You have a couple of really good quarterbacks. I love Jackson Dart coming into the year. I had not doubts but questions about Garrett Nussmeier, and I am a big Garrett Nussmeier fan in this spot. Do you think the Rebels deserve to be favored with how they've played this year compared to LSU?
Yeah, I do, honestly, because if you look at this thing just at a 30,000-foot view, the LSU offense, which is really, really good, is really close to what Ole Miss's offense is, and Ole Miss's defense is light years ahead of where LSU's defense is. So if it turns into that ping-pong game, Ole Miss's defense is likely going to be able to get more stops than LSU is going to be able to do. And in the end of the day, FanDuel thinks that Ole Miss is probably on a neutral site about a touchdown better. They'd probably be about 11 points or so at home. But 2.5 in the intangibles of Tiger Stadium, yeah, I can buy that. I understand that. And I get where they're coming from because in 2014, when Ole Miss went down there and was undefeated, Ole Miss lost that game. In 2022, when Ole Miss was undefeated and they went down there, they lost that game. Whenever Ole Miss is undefeated, they lose that game. So maybe that Kentucky game was kind of a blessing in disguise.
Well, I think it kick-started Ole Miss, gave them a swift kick in the rear to kind of let the players know, hey, you can't just coast, and they had a really easy schedule to begin the season. They were blowing everybody out. I think they might have just gotten a little bit complacent, not saying the coaches put them in that position, but, I mean, you're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old kids here. Like, that can absolutely happen. I agree that it could be a blessing in disguise, but give me your 2 biggest keys in this game against LSU, Steven. And Jackson Dart's road splits in his career have been vastly different than what he has been able to accomplish at home. Do you think that means the ground game has to be a primary factor for Ole Miss's offense?
I think Ole Miss needs to play clean offensively. That's my first key. Ole Miss needs to play clean. No turnovers, no going for it in minus territory that puts your defense in a bad situation. Do all the things that make it easier and protect that defense. And the other thing is, the other key in this game is for the defensive line for Ole Miss, which leads the NCAA in sacks right now, can affect Garrett Nussmeier. I'm not even talking about just getting to the quarterback, but make him look at the rush to where you can take that completion percentage down from about 70% to about 62%, allow defensive backs to maybe get a pick. If that happens, that's going to make the LSU offense very less effective. And you have Caleb Durham, the running back for LSU. Just make sure you continue your run defense that's been going on. And if those 3 things happen, Ole Miss is going to win this game going away.
You feel confident about the Rebels going into Death Valley, walking out with a win?
Actually, believe it or not, I do. And I
do believe that you feel confident. I do.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah. The thought coming up just a couple of weeks ago that South Carolina offense that we just saw with Lenora Sellers at quarterback put 33 points on that LSU team. And if Lenora Sellers would not have gotten hurt, South Carolina would have won that game outright.
100%.
And that going into Tiger Stadium, I realized that LSU had a week off. I realized that they have a really good offensive unit. But whenever I just keep thinking about that, I can't get it out of my head. Ole Miss should be able to honestly get a little bit right offensively. And if the defense continues to go strong, they're going to be all right. Now, remember, though, in the last 2 times that Pete Golding has gone up against the LSU offense, he's given up 45 points in Oxford, Mississippi, and like 38 points in that Jaden Daniels Alabama game 2 years ago. So there could be a little bit of a problematic thing there because talent wasn't the issue at Alabama, but we'll see if will be able to affect the game.
Well, I'm sure LSU fans will agree with that assessment across the board. So let them know in the comments, folks. Stephen Willis, Locked On Ole Miss. Appreciate it as always.
No problem. Go Vandy.
Oh, that was good. That was good. I didn't see that one coming. He didn't tell me he was going to do that, folks. The first ever Go Vandy dropped here on Locked On College Football. I was saying Go Wolfpack in the NC State sense before the year. They've let me down. But they've opened the door. For whom exactly? That's coming up next. All right, Locked On College Football fans, it's time for the Roy Player of the Week. The Roy app lets you directly support your favorite athletes. Unlike collectives where you make a donation to a general fund, Roy lets you choose the specific athlete that you want to support. You back the players you care about and in return get exclusive content after the season like personal videos and updates. And the best part, it's risk-free. If the athlete transfers or doesn't create the content, you get your money back. This week, I'm highlighting Diego Pavia of Vanderbilt as the Roy Player of the Week because he led the Vanderbilt Commodores to a win over Alabama, their first ever win against an AP Top 5 team. They were 0-60. 0-60. I mean, what more do you want from the guy? He did a little bit through the air. He was 16 of 20, a couple touchdowns, no interceptions. He ran the ball when he needed to, and he just showed the leadership qualities that it took for Vanderbilt to beat Alabama. I still can't believe that happened. I really can't. I really cannot. So that is why you should check out Roy, because you can support your favorite athletes like Diego Pavia. Plus, Roy is doing their part to bring fans closer to their schools and athletes with an exciting giveaway. Roy is giving one lucky fan 2 tickets to any game of their choice in November. Here is how to enter. Just download Roy in the App Store or Google Play. Use code LOCKEDON, 2 words, when signing up, and you're entered. That's it. Are you already on Roy? Make a payment to any athlete's campaign, and you'll also be automatically entered. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. Go to joinroy.com for official rules. Download Roy and try it out. There's no subscription, no recurring fees, and for as little as $10, you can get into the NIL game. Roy, support the players, change the game. NC State has let me down. I had faith in the Wolfpack. Good team last year, returning head coach, liked the offseason. I liked so many things about NC State. Kenton Gibbs of Locked On Wolfpack and Locked On ACC. Why is everything going horribly wrong? Because to me, it's more than just Grayson McCall's been in and out of the lineup with an injury. I mean, it doesn't look right.
You know, the biggest thing is we trusted that Tony Gibson could coach up 10 sentient Roombas and maybe 1 or 2 real ball players into being a good defense. Not saying that's what NC State has right now. NC State has some certified ball players, but the deficiencies are clear. The deficiencies that we're seeing are very much so very big things. And even beyond that, the biggest thing that I feel like is plaguing NC State right now is the seniors aren't performing. And I don't want to call guys out by name. I don't usually call guys out by name. Let me not say I don't want to. I want to be giving these guys praise. But there are multiple seniors that this was a bad year for them. This was, hey, if you play well this year, scouts have their eye on you. Guys who could have moved themselves up into first, second round territory that have laid an absolute egg. The only seniors that I can name that I can say, hey, that guy has not only played well, he's been an absolute bright spot on his team. Davin Van, DK Kaufman. Other than that, if you were to put the seniors on NC State in the Roman Coliseum, thumbs up, thumbs down, it'd be a lot of beheading going on. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to tell you. Granted, I'm not saying I would behead. I'm saying Roman Coliseum time. So in all seriousness, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, I don't understand what happened to where there was a drop-off among some of the players that were considered the best in the nation at their respective positions. All of a sudden this year, they're like, do I really want to play football? Does it really mean that much to me? Do I want to come up and make this tackle? And that's the other thing. Tackling has been a major issue for NC State, which is the antithesis of all that NC State is. We are an ag school that prides ourselves on being a tough, hand-in-the-dirt school. You know what the toughest and most hand-in-the-dirt thing a team can possibly do is? Make a damn tackle. And yet, every single game, we see at least once or twice where all of a sudden with Tony Gibson's attacking defense, where everybody's up in the line of scrimmage, it necessitates at least decent tackling, because when you miss, it hurts a lot more than if your defense was conservative and you had multiple safeties deep. It just is not the case sometimes with us. And in the moment where we can't miss, we do.
Yeah, I think that sums it up pretty well, and I think a lot of Wolfpack fans are feeling that way of like, yeah, this like even if the quarterback situation had been stable, even if the offense was good, I don't know that NC State's record would be any different than it is right now. They host Syracuse this week. I don't know if they're going to win that football game. They could turn things around a little if they do, but it's not going right. It's not going right. And coming into this year, Ken, I was pretty high on NC State, and I had them pegged as a team that could be a number 3 or 4 school in the ACC standings by the end of the year, push for a conference title game, be a dark horse contender. Their removal from that position has opened the door for other teams, and right now, you'd have to look at SMU and Pitt and say, they've walked through the door because SMU went into Louisville and won. Pitt hasn't lost a game yet, and they're ranked in the top 25, hosting Cal this week. I still see a gap between the two best teams in this league. Miami and Clemson, gap. Everybody else. Not a Moneyball 50 feet of crap sort of disparity there, but certainly a sizable enough difference to where I'm like, I don't know that there's a third legitimate contender right now. Like, Pitt is good. I don't know if Pitt is great. SMU's good. I don't know if SMU is great. Are those the only teams you see as, filling that number 3 spot? Or do you think Louisville could bounce back? Or am I missing somebody?
I would honestly not disagree on those teams being third or whoever's in third. What I would disagree with you on, I don't think that there's 1-2 gap. I don't think that that's the case at all. I think there's.
You don't think Miami and Clemson are playing football head and shoulders above everybody else?
Let me ask you this. Against Power 4 teams who will have head coaches at the beginning of the year, what is Miami's average margin of victory? So against every Power 4 team except Florida, who we all know, Billy Napier is going to be on Locked On College Football next year. Don't worry, Billy. We got a landing spot for you. Spencer's been looking for a co-host, Billy. William, can I call you William? I'm going to call you William. William, come on the show. He needs you. He's your guy. But with that being said, they have not impressed me at all. At all. And that's not to disrespect Miami, but to say, well, they had a bad game against Virginia Tech. Why? You're at home. It's a night game. Great environment. Okay, they had to travel out to Cal that night. If it weren't for a blown targeting call, Miami loses that game. Miami loses that game if it's not for the refs inexplicably saying, yeah, you know what?
I don't know about completely inexplicable.
I will say this. I know if you're a Miami fan based on the angle of that play you showed me. Because I've seen about 7 angles of it, and I know you're a Miami fan if I see the one from behind. I know that's the one.
I have seen here's what I'd say on that. I have seen less severe hits be called targeting in the past. I understand the official's argument that Mendoza's not a defenseless player, and that's what it ultimately comes down to. And when a non-defenseless player drops his head down, that's a pretty difficult position for the defender to be in.
And this is what I tweeted about Saturday night. It's, to me, I agree with the no call if we're going off common sense. However, that rule is not written in a common sense way.
No, it's not. That
call and the hit to Grayson McCall earlier in the day. And both of them, the offensive player lowered their head. And that's not something I'm debating or saying, oh, no, like the offensive players to me should never be able to change the level of their helmet and still receive targeting. I had thought we was in agreement with that. But to the letter of the rule, it is what it is. Yeah. And to that, I'm saying, did we have a launch? Did we have forcible contact to the head and neck area? What more are we looking for here? So again, this is not me hating on Miami, because I would love nothing more than to see them dominate. I mean, dominate. And at this point, I don't even care if it's a bad team. Just a team that's not a completely rudderless ship like Florida is, dominate. And I'll give you your ones. I'll say, hey, there's a gap. But I cannot say that with what I've currently seen out of that Miami team.
I think that's one interpretation. The other side of that coin, which is where I tend to lean, is Miami is not playing their best, cleanest football over the last 2 games, and they have found ways to win, and I tend to give them credit for that. I think Cam Ward is a big reason why. Like, Cam Ward might have been the most singularly impactful quarterback transfer in the offseason. If there was anyone, like, what other quarterback that was available could have Miami in the position they're in right now? Like, I mean, serious question.
No,
what was there one? Because I don't think there was.
I 1,000% agree. I would take nothing away from Cam Ward. You get the full Cam Ward experience with Cam Ward in every game in the ACC.
Yeah.
Everybody in the Pac-12 already knew this. You were going to have those players be like, oh my God, he's a freak. He's crazy.
Up here, he's down here. There's not a lot of hanging out in the middle with Cam Ward. There's a lot of
Dr.
wow.
Jekyll. Is Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde?
Yes.
Which one am I going to get, right? I'm gonna get a master class, or I'm going to get a Why would you throw Leighton across the middle, across your body in a quadruple coverage camera? So, I give them their respect. Again, that defensive line, one of the best in the country. One of the best in the country. That they absolutely can get it done in waves, by the way.
And I think that was an under-the-radar reason why they were able to come back against Cal. Like, yes, there was a targeting call and whatnot, but there were several other stops, and it was the Miami defensive line just overwhelming the Bears' offensive line.
Absolutely. Now, wait. I want to make one thing clear. The missed targeting is not the only reason that they came back, right?
No, it is not.
The defensive line whooping the wheels off of Cal up front was so important. Why does that matter? If you whoop the wheels off an opponent on the offensive line, what does that mean? They cannot effectively do what? Run the ball.
They can't do anything.
Well, of course you can't do anything, but running the ball is the most important thing when you have a lead. Why is that? Because if you have a lead, all you're trying to do, get that damn clock to 0 as soon as possible. If you cannot run the ball, the clock is going to take some time. You're going to have to throw incompletions because you can't run the ball. And even if you do run the ball, instead of having a sustained drive of, even if you have to punt it after 2 first downs, you're looking at what, 7-8 plays at that point in time, generally? Like, that's you're going to be looking at a much different situation than what we saw, where the fourth quarter, I believe they had all of 2 minutes or so, or 3 minutes of time of possession in the entire fourth quarter. That type of thing will get you killed every single time. So again, the missed targeting was not all that there was to this game, very similarly to the fact that the Hail Mary was not all there was to the Virginia Tech game. And nor am I saying, hey, there's a conspiracy, there's an ACC cabal is working to make Miami. No, ACC reps are just being ACC reps. But what I am saying is, I look at those 2 games, and to me, it is, I believe that you are not a different guy every single day, even for 18 to 22-year-olds. As a team, as a collective, you're not a different guy every single day. You are an amalgamation of your habits. And if you are winning in this ugly, kind of broken, kind of, we don't really figure it out till late.
Okay, all right.
You're going to do that later against a team that may be playing their best day.
I think Miami will lose a game eventually in the regular season. I just think these were 2 great opportunities, and Cal and Virginia Tech weren't able to capitalize. We didn't really touch on Clemson, but Clemson playing very good. Clemson's playing some really good football right now, which doesn't really surprise me. Might surprise some people. Doesn't surprise me a ton. Kenton Gibbs, Locked On ACC, Locked On Wolfpack as well. Appreciate it as always, my man.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here, man. And I'm going to tell you what. Next time you have me on this show, please don't mention NC State, all right? I got my Detroit Lions winning. The Tigers played great baseball to get themselves into the playoffs. The guys are playing, it's working. And you got to talk to me about the one team in my life that's letting me down.
It's Locked On College Football, Kenton. That's the way that it works around here. And there are a bunch of great college football games this week. You know about the big ones. What about the ones flying under the radar? Don't miss these games coming up next. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. And guess what? Are you an NFL fan? Are you a college football fan? Well, you can get a big return on FanDuel. That's America's #1 sports book. Not number 2, not number 3, not number 4, not good enough to be in the top 5, number 1, which is what Texas is in the AP poll right now. And guess what? FanDuel, they'd be number 1 in my AP poll of sports books out there. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's all available to you. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Do you want to bet college football? Well, FanDuel lets you do that. All these lines, any pick you hear on the show, if you have a reaction, oh, Spencer's so right, oh, Spencer's so wrong, well, guess what? You can go put your money where your mouth is, or where my mouth may be, over at FanDuel.com. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Good things often come in threes, like timely baskets in basketball and college football games. So this is a huge, colossally awesome week. It's an all-time Saturday. If you're going to a fall wedding this week, cancel. Call in sick. That cough you have sounds like it's really bugging you. Oh boy. You better not go give that to everybody else because it's cold and flu season and you need to just sit on your couch. I want to start with Iowa State at West Virginia. Do you understand that Iowa State is ranked number 11 in the country right now? Do you understand that Matt Campbell and Rocco Beck together have not lost a football game? Do you understand they're 2-0 in Big 12 play and that they're 3.5-point favorites on the road, according to our friends at FanDuel, against West Virginia? What do you think about West Virginia right now? What was your last impression? For many of you out there, you might have watched them in the first week. They get blasted by Penn State and you go, whatever. I got nothing. West Virginia hasn't lost a Big 12 game, by the way. Have not lost one yet. I've been pretty right on West Virginia so far. And I think I'm right when I say this is going to be an incredibly difficult game. I'm not making a pick yet. I just want this to be on your radar because you're going to talk about with your friends at the bar or hanging out on a couch or wherever you talk about college football, texting. You're going to say, oh man, I can't wait for Red River. Oh man, Ohio State, Oregon. Oh man, Tennessee, Florida. Could the Gators pull an upset and Billy Napier really save his job? Lots of great games. I'm telling you to watch those games. I don't want you to miss these though, because Iowa State should be seen as one of the favorites in the Big 12 because they're undefeated on the season. They're undefeated in Big 12 play. The only other team that can say that currently, where they don't have a loss anywhere, is BYU, who's hosting Arizona this week. That's a good game too. It's going to be in Provo. Cougars coming off a bye. Wildcats looking for a bounce back. And Arizona's Big 12 title hopes essentially on the line this week because you can't have a second conference loss this early and then go win the conference championship. But hey, the Big 12 is wild and crazy. Iowa State at West Virginia. If the Cyclones are for real as a Big 12 title contender, they go into Morgantown, win this football game. But if they lose it, you better look at West Virginia and say, hey, are they going to pull a 2021 Utah in the Pac-12 where they lose a couple games in the non-conference, but then by the time league play starts, they just keep beating everyone? This is going to be a really fun football game. Really fun and important football game because I am not going to pull the old switcheroo if Iowa State wins, where it's just West Virginia. I'm not going to pull the old switcheroo if West Virginia wins this football game and say, Iowa State, I didn't buy them before. They weren't any good. No, winner of this game is going to be 3-0 in Big 12 play. I don't think everybody realizes that. So that is absolutely an under-the-radar game that amidst a loaded lineup of college football games, you better be watching. Because it's going to be one you look back on in several weeks' time and you say, wow, that game was really important in the conference title race. What if Iowa State has one conference loss and they squeak by West Virginia, you might be going, well, man, what if they lost that game to West Virginia? They went on the road to Morgantown and won. Big game. Big game in the Big 12. Let's go to the ACC before we go to the Big 10. Under the radar game, Louisville at Virginia. So, Cardinals, bad loss last week at home. I know SMU's a solid team. They're now ranked to the top 25. They should be because they went into Louisville and won the football game, 34-27. So now Jeff Brom's team, who played in the ACC championship game a season ago, they've got one conference loss. They will have opportunities to play Miami. They will have opportunities to play Clemson and the like. And guess what? They have to go at Virginia this week. And if I asked you right now, what is Virginia's record? What do you think it is? Do you hear a lot about Tony Elliott's team? No. And frankly, you shouldn't. They haven't been special so far. They haven't pulled a major upset this season. They've just been quietly flying under the radar, and they're 4-1. They are 1-1 in ACC play. It's nothing special. They don't have a very tough schedule. It's not the most impressive 4-1 record in the country. It's still a 4-1 record in the country. Last I had checked before the year, the Cavaliers' win total was 4.5. They could go over that this week if they pull an upset. But if Louisville wants to get back to that conference championship game, they're going to have to win every game they play in all likelihood. Maybe they could lose one if some chaos ensues. They probably have to win every game. And you can't lose this one. So that's going to influence the conference title picture in the ACC. Is anyone talking about that? No. Hence the title of this segment, Under the Radar Games, that you have to be on the lookout for. Louisville at West Virginia. Cardinals about a 7.5-point favorite on the road. Interested to see how Jeff Brom's team bounces back after losing at home last week. Washington at Iowa in the Big Ten. Now this one, had Roman Tomashoff of Locked On Huskies on yesterday's show. He feels good about Washington's chances to go into Kinnick Stadium and win. He thinks they can go and knock off the Hawkeyes in front of the home crowd, overcome the defense. This game comes down to a couple things. Number one, how does Washington's offense move the ball against the Iowa defense? Because those are the two best individual units in this particular game. You have a Washington offense that put up 27 points amidst missing field goals last week against Michigan's defense. Well, Iowa's defense, you know it's good. The offense, yikes. Washington's defense, better than you think. Washington's offense, better than you think. Now, the Huskies at this point in time are 2-1 in Big Ten play. If they improve to 3-1, you're going to look at them differently. And if they pick up back-to-back wins against Michigan, which they did last week, and then they go at Iowa, where they're a 2.5-point underdog. Last time they were a 2.5-point underdog on the road, they were at Rutgers a couple weeks ago. They lost that game. I don't know if I have Roman's level of confidence of Washington's ability to go on the road because they haven't shown that yet. But certainly this is a team that everyone said, oh, it's going to be a bounce back. It's a rebuild year. Heck, Jed Fish at Big Ten Media Days said this is a rebuild. It's a complete and total rebuild because that's calling a spade a spade. Lost just about everybody from a year ago. They're starting to find their footing. If you haven't watched Jonah Coleman run the football, I think he is RB2, at worst RB3 in the 2025 NFL Draft. Ashton Genty is 1. I might have Jonah Coleman number 2. He's not the biggest guy, but man, he's good. He is explosive. He is dynamic. He is versatile. He will run through you. He will run around you. He will run away from you. Take him out, and then who's the quarterback? Oh, that's right, Will Rogers, who's thrown, I don't know, several hundred, maybe even 1,000 passes in his college football career. It's not his first go-round. He's not a guy who's going to get supremely rattled going on the road to a hostile environment. I think this game is highly interesting, and if Washington wins this game, that's going to be a confident locker room. They will have picked up 2 wins in a row that are very impressive, that people would not have pegged as Washington wins, perhaps outside of the Seattle area or inside that locker room coming into this year. And I think that Iowa has the opportunity to stem Washington's flow, but also remind themselves what they are or what they can be, because so far it's been the Iowa State loss. That's not great. Ohio State, all right, you don't expect to win that game on the road. But if Iowa loses this game, I think things could really spiral for the Hawkeyes this season. But if they win this game, optimism could be restored in Iowa City. So those are 3 under-the-radar games in a loaded, and I mean a loaded, lineup of college football here. I just can't wait for it. I'm already anxious that the games are not here in this moment. I can't wait. I'm excited for them to happen. I'm sad that it's going to be over. But don't overlook those 3 football games. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.